Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd love to share with you some of my guide's best wisdom for navigating anxiety or activation of the fight or flight system. It's something that I see over and over again with my clients. Either they come to me talking about it directly, it's something that they've noticed in their life that they just can't seem to keep their stress level down or keep their mind from racing or calm down enough to get a good night's sleep. Or they'll come to me with other issues or problems in their emotional aspects or the thoughts that race around in their head or some health problems. And the guides will say, wow, one of the best ways you could possibly address this is with the fight or flight system. And so one of the things that's really challenging about the fight or flight system, and some of the clients that I see it the most in, are people who grew up in a less than optimal environment. And this could be the obvious things like abuse or trauma, or as in my case, I was just so darn energetically sensitive that I was activated pretty much every time I had to deal with other humans. So there was so much information. I was feeling the energy of their thoughts and their feelings, but I didn't have a map. So for me, it was just like being bombarded with this massive white noise. And I was overly activated with it to the point that I was dissociative. And one of the particularly horrible aspects of this is it made me absolutely lousy at social cues. And so I was a super activated, tense, awkward child. And when people didn't enjoy me as a result of my not being able to connect like a normal child, I could feel that they weren't liking me. I could feel that they weren't enjoying me, but I was absolutely clueless about what I could do to fix the problem. And so the upshot was that this was a problem that really lived with me. And I see this also with, again, people who have a real trauma or have a real abuse background. And this could be in this lifetime or this could be in a past life. So some people come into a really benevolent family of origin that's much more a story of needs met than needs not met, and still just have that dial really wound up. And one of the challenges of it is over time we get acclimated to it. So if you're a child trying to strategically navigate childhood and figure out what the heck that adult wants from you or how to stay safe, the last thing in the world you're tuning into is your pounding heart or your racing mind or your thinking. You actually tune that out. And that becomes problematic when we get into our adult years and we have a lot more choice. So on the upside, we have a lot more ability to manage our environment. You know, if we're working with a boss who is like a mean third grade teacher, we can go find another job or talk to HR or get reassigned. There's so much we can do not to be trapped in that environment and just having to endure it. And also on the flip side, our health doesn't have the resilience to be hammered at day in and day out by the inflammation and the kind of physiological changes that the fight or flight induces. So a lot of the population is running around with their fight or flight on at a low level all the time. And they don't even notice until it spins out, until it gets really big and really loud to the point that they can't think clearly and their heart is pounding. And even then they may try to tune it out to try to deal with whatever situation is the activating part. Because if you've ever tried to do some deep breathing or some meditation at the point that it's off to the races and really, really activated, you may not have had very good results with it. You may not have found that you got much leverage with it. You didn't get very far. So why bother is kind of the outcome. And at the same time, in the background, this fight or flight being turned on is messing with our digestion. It's turning off our immune system. It's creating inflammation in the body. It's deprioritizing low-level healing. So whenever I work with someone who just has lots and lots of little symptoms all over the place, one of the things that sparks for me is, oh, they're below threshold, so their body isn't able to rebalance in the thousand subtle ways our body is constantly healing and repairing and rebalancing. And the reason that they're below threshold may very well be this fight or flight, because we want to spend most of our time not in stress state, but in thrive state, where we're like, oh, there's no danger here, so my body can do all these magnificent things that it's capable of doing. And as has been written about extensively, we know that the modern world is just really hard on our hunter-gatherer biology. We're getting the wrong kinds of light at the wrong times of day. We're getting lots of micro stressor doses and things that activate this system, but the threats are complex navigation experiences. So disharmony with another person may have really complex origins, but create a low level of stress and activation in the background. And the instincts usually communicate by tension in our body. And what's interesting about this whole mechanism is the mind always believes the body. So I often see my clients trying to solve the problem of their instincts by trying to think more positively or do affirmations or work with their mind or have less shame. And these are all great things. I'm all in favor of providing the mind with some adult supervision. But what I think people often don't realize is the body activates. So maybe there's a loud noise. Maybe there's a near miss when you're driving into work and something startles you. Maybe you just didn't get as much sleep as you needed. That'll produce stress in the body. And then with all these chemicals kind of floating around, what happens is the mind then believes the body. It's like, okay, body, you're telling me that there's a threat here. And so the mind goes to work finding it. And if you think about this in hunter-gatherer context, this would be fine. You would be walking along, enjoying, minding your own business, and then something would trigger your instincts. And you'd have this moment where your heart sped up in this flash of really present awareness, which is super useful. And then you would look down and realize you were about to step on a snake and this was a bad thing. Or through the bushes, a tiger is trying to decide whether you or your children would make a good meal. Or you're about to wander absent-mindedly off a cliff, or there's something in your environment. So you would have the reaction, your entire system would prioritize the mind being put into service of identifying the threat. And then when you identify the threat, it would complete the feedback loop and the adrenaline would come down once you said, okay, I'm away from the snake, or, oh, it was just a rabbit running like hell from me. It was trying to get away. Not a problem. That rustle in the bushes. It's not a snake. It's not a bear. We're good. And then your levels would drop and you would go on about all the cool cognitive things that you might have been up to before, like figuring out what herbs you're going to make for dinner or trying to remember, when those berries over there were going to be ripe or whatever else it was that you were up to that day. And then you would go home and you would be with the fire with other people and you would tell stories and you'd have this really good community time and you would complete the cycle. But in the modern era, what we have is we get these activations and the mind looks around, where's the danger? But it can't make sense of the adrenaline in the body because there is no clear and present danger. Our physical safety isn't being threatened. And often one of the interesting things is because of the importance for early humans in being in tribes, we actually are under enormous stress with social rejection. So interestingly enough, social rejection lights up a lot of the same parts of the brain as physical pain. Not the thing that says, ow, my finger is burning, but like a whole bunch of the same other parts of the brain light up if you experience a social rejection. And this is because if you got kicked out of the tribe, that was a death sentence. So you had to worry about not stepping on a poisonous snake and not annoying your fellow tribe members so much that they couldn't tolerate you anymore and you had to go away, in which case you would be very, very likely to die. They've done this reality show where they send people off in Patagonia with only a handful of modern things to see how long they can survive. And, granted, they may be cherry picking. There may be a handful of better surviving on their own clone with no modern things humans, but most of these people who end up on the show who are very, very good at it still can't last more than a few months. So it's really, really challenging outside of the modern era. It's much more available now that we can have all the modern conveniences and things that we can organize. But our biology is slow to catch up. This really old system doesn't know that. And so you might have your boss looking oddly at you, and the system, if it's activated, if it's not activated, you might be like, oh yeah, I remember he's going in for a surgery next week. He's probably kind of anxious about that, poor guy. But if you're interpreting that same expression through the lens of stress state, you'll be like, oh, what's wrong? I might be about to get fired. And the trouble is the mind's going to make up a story that is congruent. It's proportional to the level of activation. So if you have this really lot of chemistry, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of cortisol, then your mind's going to come up with a terrifying thing. So money is a really big one. Livelihood, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to run out of money. Health scares are also very, very popular with the freaked out mind. What if I have cancer? What if I have heart disease? You can get some weird symptoms when you have this whole system activated. And so your mind can run off. What if something's horribly wrong with my health? Or if you have children, what if, little Tommy is this, that, or the other thing? He's going to have a bad outcome. Or maybe you're stressed in your marriage. What if this person's going to leave me? I wonder if he or she is cheating on me. There's this scenario. And then your mind actually experiences some relief because it's completed the cycle in a weird, convoluted kind of way. And your mind's like, okay, I found the scariest thing that matches my level of activation. So I should watch cancer, or I should watch losing my job, or I should watch my best friend's going to hate me and leave the relationship. Like our mind picks the thing that seems to fit with the chemistry, and then it becomes hyper vigilant and focused on that thing and watching that thing like crazy. And then we think like, wow, what crazy thoughts I have, but we don't realize that it's a reaction to the chemistry that started in our body. And so the first thing I would recommend knowing is intervening at the body level, intervening at the chemistry level, and then seeing what's left about the thinking that might need a little bit of attention will give you a lot more leverage, not only to clean up all the stress state activations in your body, but also to have your mind be a much friendlier neighborhood. Our mind under the influence of the fight or flight system is a really bad neighborhood because one of the ways that we respond to social stress is to take a catalog of everything that might be wrong with us that makes people not like us, that is putting our survival at risk for being thrown out of the tribe. And when we're not in stress state, we have a more balanced perspective. So a non-stressed person can think, well, I don't love it when people don't like me, but I don't like everybody either. We don't really have to deal with each other. It's not a big deal. Whereas if you've ever felt that just tension in your body that someone you didn't even really care for didn't like you, then you're probably under stress state. It's probably something to take a look at. So tip number one, when your thinking gets all wonky and crazy and stressful and miserable, or those middle of the night worries, just check in with yourself about whether your body's in stress state and consider doing direct interventions related to that. Slow, deep breathing, meditation, gratitude journaling. These are all interventions that are going to hack the chemistry of your body and get it to chill out. You can also complete the cycle with exercise, talking to a trusted friend. Like one of the very, very best things for women, particularly bringing down their stress level, is social connection. If you get to talk it out with a friend and you still feel heart connected, then your levels are going to drop. So if your mind's gotten crazy, consider a stress reducing intervention for something that works for you. I highly recommend having a list of these written down because your cognitive capacity is going to be reduced under stress state. So you might have 50 different great practices and 10 go-to ones that you've developed that work very well. And you'll probably forget a lot of them under the stress state, which is priming your system to run away, to fight, or freeze, and sending your mind racing. So this is not a time that our problem-solving, troubleshooting, complicated problem system is working properly. And so it's just good to have a little list already written down so you can start working through it. The second part of this is something that we can really amp up with shamanism, but even if you don't have any training or background or engagement with this, you don't necessarily need to know how to do this. So this podcast is for people who weren't even sure how to pronounce shamanism when they started listening, as well as for people who are experienced practitioners. And so if you're a less experienced person, then this is just a culmination of some of the best wisdom that my guides have given me over 20 years. So it's hopefully some valuable recommendations. But if you are a practitioner, one of the things that I would offer is most of the training around journey work is teaching you to send your awareness outside yourself, to talk to your angels, to talk to your spiritual teachers, to talk to your power animals, to go to these different beautiful worlds that come with shamanism. And if you're interested in learning more, my first book, Practical Shamanism, A Guide for Walking in Both Worlds, is a really great way to kind of get a foundation of this. I'm a huge fan, but I want this to be useful even if you don't really know a whole lot and don't have a ton of background. But the flip side is that we can use our shamanic training, our psychic awareness, our ability to perceive that which is unseen by our physical senses. We can turn that inward and we can journey inside of ourselves and we can directly intervene. So I do work like I might work with a client where I go and I see the energetic intrusions in their energy field and I draw those out, and then they have an opportunity to experience healing and health and well-being as a result of not having inappropriate, intrusive energies in their field. And that's an example of using my intention and my focus to create an energetic intervention outside of myself. But I can also go in and have a little chat with this freaked out fight or flight system. And what I like to visualize, the thing that works really well for me, is something that one of my teachers taught me along the way. And what it is using a personification of this fight or flight system as the jaguar. And so the fight or flight system in the anatomy of the chakras is located in the sacral chakra, the second chakra. And in this particular South American influenced shamanic tradition, the animal of the sacral chakra is the jaguar. You can totally pick another animal if you want, but I love my big kitty and it's really, really fun way to do it. And the visual that I have is when my fight or flight system gets activated, my jaguar goes up the tree. And she's looking around. Where's the danger? Where's the danger? What should I fight? What should I bite? What do I need to deal with? What's the problem? And there are people who I work with all the time that when I go in and I look at this part of them, their jaguar's been up the tree almost their whole life. This poor representation of the system is exhausted and frazzled and living in hypervigilance. And the cool thing about the fight or flight system is it is a fast system to turn on. So you don't need to stay safe by being on edge all the time. It's actually better if you're not. Like if we were hooking this up and looking at it at a biological level, we would have high heart rate variability, which means that your system is responding to all the stimulus as you move your body, as your awareness happens. You know, we think the heart beats like a metronome, but actually there's these little spaces that are longer and shorter, and having a high level of change and movement over time is a really good sign of health. Whereas when it just gets activated and accelerated all the time, that's a heart that's under stress at a low level. So the cool thing about shamanism is we can often catch illness and problems in the body and problems in the system before they manifest in the physical. So this is a really, really great thing to deal with before your heart's under enough stress that the medical model is needing to intervene. So fantastic way of promoting physical health as well as emotional and psychological health. and just a much, much happier way to be in the world. So the trick is, number one, to learn to track your jaguar, to learn to know where your jaguar is every moment. So when I was growing up, I tuned this out all the time because I was just putting all of my awareness and trying to figure out what the adults around me wanted so they wouldn't be even more annoyed with me than they might have already been. My family was much more tolerant, but, out in the world, my awkward sensitivity, all of that just didn't go so well for how I was able to interface. So really, really little girl under a lot of stress. So I was never tuning into the stress in my body. I was always tuning into navigating the external situation, which was appropriate for childhood. But as an adult, I want to notice the second my jaguar goes up the tree so I can bring her back down. I want to coax her back down immediately so I don't end up having all that chemistry get away from me. So my fight or flight system is going to activate. It's going to turn on. It turns on all the time. It's just the nature of being in the world. But if it's starting from a low baseline, if it's starting from a really calm baseline, it's not going to spike as high when it does spike. So the same loud noise is going to affect me a lot less than someone whose baseline system is already activated. And the challenge is you get numb to that. So you might even not know how activated and how much stress you're under. And this gives you the opportunity over time to create a whole new baseline where the energy is much calmer in your body as a starting place, and then you notice. And so putting my awareness on making the most important thing, if there isn't something that's going to drop, if I'm not going to run into someone while I'm driving my car, I generally stop whatever I'm doing to get my jaguar down from the tree when she goes up. I've trained my awareness to have this be something that it prioritizes paying attention to, and that's just a persistence. So one of the tricks that the guides often give to my clients is put a reminder in your phone, not a pinging reminder, but just a visual reminder that goes off every half hour, every hour. Do this for a week and during your waking hours, and just take 4 slow, deep breaths. It could be the 4-7-8 breath where you breathe in for 4, hold for 7, and then breathe out for 8. So that's a really good one. Or it could be coaxing your jaguar down from the tree and checking in with her and telling her all is well, all is well. Kitty cats don't need to be up a tree hypervigilant. They can come awake all ready to fight, bite, claw, run, flee, whatever, from a deep, deep sleep in a heartbeat if something triggers their response. And we can take a page from their book and know that we don't have to walk around hypervigilant. It's so much better for brain health and physical health if we don't. And we can trust that our jaguar who's rested and relaxed can then be available to respond when we drop the piece of toast and we want to catch it before it lands butter side down. So there's a lot here to unpack, but just to kind of start to get you started, it's great if you have longer practices that are restorative, but something as simple as interrupting yourself to check in with this system can really retrain your brain to pay attention to what's going on with it, and having regular reminders. And then do a little bit of research and development. Figure out what your best strategies are so you have the techniques at your fingertips to know how to calm yourself when you need to. That's where the little list can be really super handy. And give this a try when you're not in stress state, because I think a lot of people give up on stress management until it becomes a severe medical issue because they've tried a few deep breaths when they were really freaked out and it did very little to make a difference. I'm not saying don't do these practices when you're really freaked out, but the relationship building where my jaguar trusts me enough to come down from the tree has happened at times when nothing bad was going on. So every time I coax her down from the tree and I don't die, you have to not die afterwards, but when I don't die, I build trust with her because I told her all was well. It's completing that cycle like, I thought there was something rustling in the bushes. All my attention went there. It's just a rabbit that's running away. It's not a poisonous snake. It's not a person from the neighboring tribe with a club here to attack us and steal our supplies. Okay, all is well. So it's a way of completing that cycle organically again and again, and having the presence with yourself so you notice. So for those of you who are deeper into shamanic journey work, learning to use your psychic ability and your attention and your awareness to tune in inside yourself rather than looking out at the world is very, very powerful. So it's this tool that gets used in a magnificent way externally. I'm a huge fan, but there's also so much power when you bring it internally. And as many of my teachers have said, shamanism is really just a work of intention and focus. And there are a lot of tools that help us with that. But you don't need to have taken a class or know how to journey or understand the lingo to begin to use your awareness in a different way, to learn to track your own energy, to learn to understand what's happening inside of you, and to begin to intervene, to begin to create these interventions that then calm things down. And the more aware of that you are, the more you can track your own energy, the more effective you can be, because you can try a practice and then be able to perceive the change and the results. So it's not just taking some deep breaths and not knowing what happens, but being able to tune in. This is really powerful. You see this in modalities that use biofeedback. There's some video games that do this, and there are different things that you can hook someone up to machines. And if they can see on a screen the feedback of how their heart is calming down and how their reactivity is coming down, they can very quickly tune in to what they're doing to make that happen. It's a really cool thing, but we often lack feedback. And this is about training your awareness to be able to provide you with feedback about how activated the system is so that you can intervene before it gets to those really, really high levels and walk around with a baseline thrive state, because you're so much more effective in the world. Even if you did have one of those big problems your mind is racing about, your resourcefulness and your ingenuity and your ability to solve it and navigate it would be massively increased if you are not super, super freaked out. The fight or flight doesn't help us think clearly, and we really do need to think clearly in the modern era. Many of our outcomes hinge off of that. And so thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this is something that provides value for you. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.